popularly enough. And it's actually kind of frustrating how that works, because we keep being people like Edward Snowden keep being demonized for doing the right thing. He did what essentially he viewed as the right thing, and it was, in fact, I believe, the right thing. And yet you get demonized for doing such a thing as the right thing. How dare you do what you believe is right and correct? Well, if you do, then we'll have to chase you down and call out a warrant for your arrest, and we'll have different generals saying that you should be hanged, and we'll have senators saying that you should be shot. And so don't you dare ever do the right thing. It was Yahoo Politics, actually, that came out with a story saying Eric Holder, Justice Department head, now could strike a deal with Edward Snowden, was the headline from Yahoo Politics. So former Attorney General Eric Holder said that there actually is a possibility for the Justice Department to cut a deal with former NSA contractor Edward Snowden that would allow him to return from the United States, or to the United States from Moscow, I should say. To which the question needs to be raised, why would he want to return to the United States from Moscow? After all, it seems like he's doing kind of okay now in Moscow. So why would you want to come back? I mean, what's the incentive to come back other than, okay, family and friends, maybe, but it seems like he's enjoying his life in Moscow. So why would you want to come back to the States? Well, in an interview with Yahoo News, Eric Holder said, "We are in a different place as a result of the Snowden disclosures, and that his actions spurred a necessary debate that prompted President Obama and Congress to change policies on the bulk collection of phone records of American citizens." And perhaps that's something that needs to be a point that needs to be raised, is that without Edward Snowden, we wouldn't know anything about the NSA spying. We would not know a single thing about the NSA spying. Now, you may see that as a right and just thing, that we don't know or wouldn't know anything about NSA spying. However, I would contend with that point, because really it's done us a whole lot of good to know about NSA spying. After all, how else would we know the different abuses which the government is constantly using against us? Well, in an interview with Yahoo News, he said that the possibility does exist. And when asked if he meant that the Justice Department might now be open to a plea bargain that allows Snowden to return from his self-imposed exile in Moscow, Eric Holder replied, "I certainly think there could be a basis for a resolution that everybody could ultimately be satisfied with. I think the possibility exists." Holder's comments came as he began a new job as a private lawyer at Covington and Burling, which is the elite Washington law firm where he worked before serving as the nation's top law enforcement officer from February 2009 until last April. In that capacity, Eric Holder presided over an unprecedented crackdown on government leakers, including the filing of a June 2013 criminal complaint against Snowden, charging him with 3 felony violations of the Espionage Act for turning over tens of thousands of government documents to different journalists. But again, leaks such as these are good and necessary for any sort of democracy, actually, which we kind of sort of have here a little bit in the United States. We kind of sort of a little bit have a democracy, although probably not too much anymore, if at all. It's more of a constitutional republic, and even then that doesn't really function too well now. So it's really more of a anarchy state, because the government does what it will without any sort of repercussions from the populace. Except if there's a leak such as this one, then we have access to all these different files, and then we're able to find out what happens in the government sector. And so leaks such as the ones that are brought about by, say, Julian Assange, where we found about the collateral murder video, or Edward Snowden, where we found about NSA spying, and quite a bit more than that, or even if you want to go farther back than that, the Pentagon Papers, where we found out all sorts of atrocities that occurred during the Vietnam War. All sorts of things such as these are necessary for any sort of actual real discourse. After all, how can you debate the government if you don't know what's actually happening within government? You really can't. That option isn't available to you if you don't know all the information. And it's not right that the people are less informed than the government is about what goes on internationally or what goes on within government. After all, we're supposed to be the ones who are ruling over government. Right? I mean, that's how it's supposed to be. We're supposed to be the ones who have hired these people to do their job, and yet oftentimes they don't even do their job, and when they do it in a wrong way, in an abusive way. So it's absolutely necessary that leaks such as these occur so that we know what's going on and what abuses the government is carrying out. So thank goodness for Edward Snowden and all the other leakers out there who have brought out information that is absolutely necessary for us to know what's happening within the government. And we have a fundamental flaw with a lot of people who are saying that, oh, I don't want to know what the government does because I shouldn't know. Well, that's entirely the wrong mindset, because if you don't want to know and you think that you shouldn't know, then what should you know anyway? What do you think you should know? I want to know everything. I want to know absolutely everything that I could ever possibly learn. If I can learn something about something, then I will do it. I have to learn everything or else I'll feel incomplete. I need to learn everything that I can. You might call me a busybody. You might say that I'm in over my head. Maybe I am. But nevertheless, I want to know everything that I can about every possible thing. Otherwise, I'll feel incomplete. I'll feel like I'm misinformed or uninformed, and I don't want to be misinformed or uninformed. So I get my news directly from the source, from leakers, from people on Twitter when we're talking about incidents that are happening on the ground somewhere. I get it from there instead of from the big news sources, because the big news sources tend to take the official angle, which tends to be wrong, to put it lightly. It tends to be a little bit incomplete, to put it lightly. And I don't want an incomplete story. I want the whole thing. I want to know what's going on the ground currently right now. If I can't get that information, I'm very unhappy. Which is maybe why I'm a decent news director, I suppose, because I want to know what's actually happening and I actually kind of care about what happens, and I don't just regurgitate the same old spiel that everyone does, where they say, "Well, the police say that such and such is happening." It's like, okay, the police say that, but what's another angle? What can we get aside from that? Okay, I'll give you a good example. Just recently, we had the stock market problem, right? Like just recently, as in tomorrow, we were reporting live on it here on Hot News Talk Radio and Hot News Live at 5, where, of course, we have you covered, or we've got you covered. It is imperative for me to make sure that you are informed about these different events as they occur. If you're not, then I'm not doing my job well. So I need to make sure you know about what's going on. And one of the things that happened yesterday that I felt was imperative you know about was the stock market problem, where the New York Stock Exchange was shut down due to what they were calling a computer glitch. Well, what was the cause of that? What was the computer glitch? We don't actually know right now, and that's the annoying thing. If you look at the news right now, all the articles are from 19 hours ago, 16 hours ago. The most recent one is from 4 hours ago, but it's an opinion piece, so that doesn't really matter. So all the news sources are from 19 hours ago, 14 hours ago. It's not really anything up to the minute. And there's some stuff even from overseas. Wall Street Journal has an opinion piece from 20 hours ago, but again, opinion pieces don't really matter that much. USA Today has an opinion piece again from 20 hours ago, and all sorts of different news sources have different opinion pieces, but no real facts. I mean, opinions are opinions, and certainly opinions are valuable, but it's not facts. I want facts because I'm a news director. I need the facts. I need to know what's going on, and I can't. I don't know what's happening with the New York Stock Exchange. There's not really any definitive way for me to determine what happened with the New York Stock Exchange. I even made phone calls. I made calls to people who are in New York. I made calls to the New York Stock Exchange, their main offices. I said, look, is there any way I can get some sort of information? Maybe you know what's going on here. Nobody wants to give you any information. They just forward you to their PR person who doesn't say anything worth hearing. So it's just the same stuff that's already in the articles everywhere. So it's really not very unique. It's just, hey, look, stuff is happening. We can confirm stuff is happening, and that's about it. So it's a really frustrating situation. Well, in case you don't know what happened, we had a bit of a problem with the New York Stock Exchange where at about 11:32 a.m., trading was halted and all orders that were pending were stopped. And for some reason, the New York Stock Exchange was shut down for actually quite a long time. And they're saying that it was a software glitch, just technical glitches. That's all we can get, technical glitches. They won't give any information other than that, which is kind of obnoxious because I assume people lost money over this. I didn't, obviously, because I don't involve myself in the stock market. I see it as a bit of a sham. But nevertheless, people did lose their money, and that's certainly an injustice that occurred. If somebody loses money, that's kind of a big problem. And yet, really, there was no information on it that was actually factual. Although, here's what we can give you in terms of what really did happen. This is the maximum that I can give you. The New York Stock Exchange suspended trading at 11:32 a.m. Eastern Standard Time yesterday on Wednesday, and it stayed down for nearly 4 hours. So then trading did finally resume at 3:10 p.m. Eastern Time, our time, and it had, of course, been a rough day where we were seeing plunges in the Dow and plunges pretty much everywhere. And there are some problems going on in the EU, obviously, that add on to that. But as it is right now, we don't really know anything other than that. There was a problem at 11:32, and then it went back online at about 3:20. And that's all we can give you. I'm serious. That's it. So as soon as more information on the New York Stock Exchange comes up, of course, I'll bring it to you because I'm personally invested in this. Although I'm not personally invested in the stock exchange, I am personally invested in finding out what actually happened here because nobody seems to be too interested in getting news about the New York Stock Exchange anymore. If you look at cable news right now, they're busy talking about Jeb Bush right now. Jeb Bush clarifying his remarks on whatever it is. Part-timers who want full-time work presently is what they're talking about on the cable news, because for some reason that matters. So we're getting that instead of trying to find out what happened with the NYSE. We're getting that instead of trying to figure out what's going on in Greece right now. All these sorts of things, and it's just a waste of time. But then again, that happens when you have 24-hour news. You're going to get a news cycle that's full of, well, filler. It's like insulation. They just sort of squirt it in there, and really the only thing of substance is very, very far and few between, or few and far between. There we go. Very few and far between when it comes to actual little nuggets of substance in there. It's very frustrating. What I do is I try to make everything of substance, and it's not easy. Fortunately, we only have an hour to fill, so there's that as well. Are you familiar with Silk Road? Well, Silk Road was a drug marketplace that was allegedly run by Ross Ulbright, aka Dread Pirate Roberts, and it caused quite a bit of controversy because people could buy and sell drugs online. It certainly was not unique in that regard, by the way. You can buy and sell drugs online, many different marketplaces. I personally witnessed many different marketplaces that can be used for the sale and purchase of narcotics, although mostly the purchase, because they don't want unverified people selling narcotics, because then you have people who are buying them who are not getting good stuff, and maybe you get poisoning or toxicity, or you don't know. Drugs are not to be trifled with. I would not recommend you ever do drugs, but if you are going to do drugs, make sure you're doing the real thing. Make sure you're not doing something that some guy cooked up in his bathtub as opposed to the real thing. You got to be careful about that. And one of the harm reduction efforts was Silk Road, which allowed you to get the good stuff at a good price too. Silk Road creator Ulbright is an eternal optimist, according to Ars Technica, and he's written a letter from prison. Of course, he's convicted now. Convicted Silk Road mastermind Ross Ulbright has made his first public statement since he was sentenced to life in prison, writing a letter addressed to PorcFest, which is a libertarian gathering that he had previously attended, saying, "Unfortunately, the worst case scenario has played out for me, and I've been sentenced to spend the rest of my life in prison," writes Ulbright from the New York City detention facility that he's been held at while his appeal proceeds. In the handwritten letter, he goes on to say that he's an eternal optimist and will never give up hope for my release, he says. He hopes the appeals court will recognize the errors by some and outright corruption by others in the government and give me some kind of remedy. It could be a new trial where hopefully the whole story can be told, or the case could be dismissed altogether. Now, because he is going for an appeal, unfortunately, I don't believe that there's going to be any sort of autobiographical work from Mr. Ulbright to perhaps elaborate on what really happened at Silk Road. As it is right now, we don't know the whole facts. That's something that needs to be made especially clear. We do not know the whole facts of what happened with Silk Road. Again, Silk Road was an online drug buying marketplace that was on the deep web, only accessible through the Tor network. So it was, for a lot of people, it was a wonderful outlet for buying drugs in a non-dangerous environment. They were assured that they were getting the real thing. I've seen different videos of people buying drugs from Silk Road. It's actually really easy. You paid with Bitcoin, and it was just really easy. Something on a similar topic, although not on the topic of narcotics, there's a really, really good book that I recommend you check out called Thieves Emporium by Max Hernandez. It's one of those books that hooks you when you first read it. And I'm not being paid to say this, by the way, but I read the book on recommendation from a friend, and I was really astounded with how accurate it was, technically accurate it was, and how well written it was. So if you're interested in a book on that sort of topic, although slightly fictionalized, some of the phraseology has been adjusted, but it is still technically correct in terms of the technicalities. It is very well written. That's Thieves Emporium by Max Hernandez. Something that needs to be kept in mind, though, is it's definitely not a book for kids. There are some rather graphic scenes within, but I mean, it's real life. There's not anything in that you wouldn't read in a news story. We'll put it that way. Real life is graphic, and so is this book. That's just how it is. It's not an adult book in terms of it being, ooh, it's an erotic book. No, it's not like 50 Shades of Grey. It's just, it has adult subject matter that is not meant for small children or people under the age of 18, I would suppose. It's a very, very interesting book. I would definitely recommend that. That's Thieves Emporium by Max Hernandez. I think you can pick it up on, you can pick it up on Amazon, and it carries my my seal of approval, because it is a very, very wonderful book. I've spoken to the publisher of the book, and he's very, very happy that I've read it and enjoyed it. And it really is, it's one of those books that just hooks you from the beginning. The publisher told me, and I'll relay to you, if you're not hooked by the first chapter, it's probably not for you. And I think that's absolutely correct. I read the first chapter and I was just floored, and I couldn't stop reading after that. So I was very, very pleased with it. That's Thieves Emporium by Max Hernandez. Definitely check that out. That book out if you want to read a interesting, very well written account, fictionalized account, of course, of what it's like to operate in the deep web, sometimes even as a journalist. So in the Silk Road, there's been kind of some problems where, of course, it's not there anymore, and Mr. Albright was unfortunately arrested for the sale of drugs on this online marketplace. So in many ways, he says, my struggle is just getting started now, Albright writes. The letter asks PorcFest attendees for donations for his legal fund before concluding, keep fighting for your freedom and eventually we will win. The Porcupine Freedom Festival, also known as PorcFest, is an annual liberty camping event put on each year in the New Hampshire area by the Free State Project. Lynn Albright, Ross's mother, spoke about his case last year. PorcFest took place in late June, and the handwritten letter was posted to the Free Press website on Monday and reported on by Vice Magazine earlier today, and they have it reproduced over at Ars Technica and on Vice Magazine as well. The letter does include two redacted and replaced phrases, which were changed with Ross's permission as per the attorney's guidance. So the Free Ross campaign, guided by Lynn Albright, is seeking $650,000 to cover Albright's legal costs, including his appeal. Currently, it has raised just $370,000. Still, though, that's pretty impressive for the legal fund of somebody who some consider to be extremely despicable and who others consider to be a bit of a hero in terms of the online marketplace and really a true free market. The outright corruption referred to in the letter presumably refers to the two federal agents who allegedly stole from the Silk Road while they were investigating it. DEA agent Carl Force pled guilty to charges of extortion, obstruction, and money laundering earlier in this month, and he's going to be sentenced in October. Force also had struck a deal with the 20th Century Fox to tell his life story for an upcoming Silk Road movie, under which he could have been paid up to $240,000. Presumably, Ross Albright is going to be played by Benedict Cumberbatch. So it's going to be a yet again, it's commercializing a really just an important topic in internet culture, although I hate to say that, and also just political theory in general, where something like this is a real example of what do you do in this situation? You know, what do you do when there's an online drug marketplace on a network that's almost anonymous, although obviously not quite, and it's a nationless entity? I mean, the internet does not have nationality. There are no nationalities on the internet unless you make yourself to have one, because nobody needs to know where you're from. If I'm on the internet, especially deep web, and say you're in a chat room, nobody needs to know where you're from. And that creates a discourse that's completely different from any other sort of conversation you may have when you're talking to somebody in person, where nobody needs to know who you are, where you're from, or anything like that. And really, sometimes that leads to some of the more honest conversations you can ever have, is when somebody doesn't know who you are, where you're from, or anything along those lines. And really, that can lead to some of the more honest conversations you'll probably ever have. So it's interesting how that works out. Now, of course, this could be likened to a local economy market as well, which is, of course, a true free market. Unfortunately, a true free market does not really exist in the United States in the mainstream. I don't know of anywhere where it does exist in the mainstream, unfortunately. We could be the first, and sometime in the near future or the far future or sometime, but it's not likely right now. If there's a true free market, then I could buy and sell anything I wanted, barring, of course, human beings and other such moral ambiguities. But it's a true free market really doesn't exist except in the black market, where you really get the true value of something. You really know what something actually is worth on a black market, whereas you don't really in the clear market, you might call it. Of course, that applies to weapons, that applies to anything at all, drugs, what have you. Street values, what is normally referred to, that's actually real market value, because they're counting in risk, they're counting everything. This is Digital Drive. I'm your host, Russell. We're talking about technology and quite a bit more. Nuganomics.com is coming up in about 30 minutes here on Hot News Talk Radio, and he talks about local economy and free markets in a much more in-depth way right here on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240, and hotnewstalkradio.com.
This is a mob mode. This is the mob mode. What kind of fool do you think I am? Just think I know nothing of
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240. Hi, this is your computer speaking. I don't feel so well, It's like I've come down with a bug, and I'm getting slower.
Affordable Computers. We fix sick computers. Your hometown guys at Affordable Computers will repair your PC in half the time of the big boys at an affordable price. No tricks, no gimmicks, no computer speak technobabble. Just good, quick, and courteous affordable service and repairs. Want to affordably supercharge your PC? Affordable Computers on Highway 58. Affordable Computers hand builds all desktops in-house. If you're looking for a better-than-new refurb laptop, $150 will get you a Dell or another name brand at Affordable Computers. Affordable Computers, Highway 58, between Arby's and Taco Bell. Also Fort O, Battlefield Parkway, near Holcomb's. Affordable Computers, we service what we sell. Call 499-1975. That's 499-1975.
Wow, this is amazing. I'm feeling great. Supercharged.
We've got a table here at Delia's in Saudi Daisy, ready to delight in a plate of authentic Mexican food. Delia's spreads a rich selection, loaded nachos, crazy chicken, homemade tamales, maybe the enchiladas with beef, chicken, pork, quesadillas, every dish beautifully pictured on the menu to help us decide. Join us for lunch or dinner. We're at Delia's in Saudi Daisy on Dayton Pike near the Thrasher Light. Here's dinner. Delia's uses the freshest ingredients, cooked to perfection. Nachos, homemade. Delia's open every day except the Lord's Day. For lunch and dinner, treat yourself to Delia's genuine Mexican food. In Saudi, call 521-7145. That's 521-7145.
Do you feel better outside your home or business than in? Indoor air quality is important. Mildew, mold, smoke, water, and rodent damage are prime causes of poor indoor air quality. Ducts Indoor Air Professionals, better known as Duct Busters, cleans HVAC systems using 127 definable Duct Busters steps. Let Mark Thompson address the indoor air quality at your business to help reduce employee illnesses. Prevent fires by cleaning your dryer vents. Mark and his parents, Dick and Joan Thompson, have been building our local economy and helping local people with HVAC systems 16 years. Ducts Indoor Air Professionals. Call 876-9907. 876-9907. Ducks. Call now.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
You love your hometown. Are you interested in free markets, in local economy? Do you hope that Chattanooga can survive the next meltdown, the next chain of disasters in the national economy? What's the best way to live out the ideals of self-government and self-determination? Join me, David Toulis, weekdays 1 to 3.
Hot News Talk 1240.
Love your neighbor, buy local.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
Hot News Talk 1240.
Fox News Radio. I'm Lillian Wu. The Confederate flag will be removed from the South Carolina State House grounds on Friday after a debate and vote overnight. The debate renewed after the massacre at a historically black church in Charleston.
The alleged gunman, an avowed white supremacist who posed for pictures with the Confederate banner. The attack claimed the lives of 9 people, including State Senator Clemente Pinckney.
Fox's Jonathan Sari in South Carolina.
Governor Nikki Haley issued a statement saying, quote, "It is a new day in South Carolina, a day we can all be proud of, a day that truly brings us all together as we continue to heal as one people."
Florida Supreme Court says that congressional districts passed by Republicans are unconstitutional, and the search continues in the Wyoming wilderness for 3 Midwestern sisters missing for days. There are now 60 people combing the area on horseback, foot, and with the help of dogs. Fox News, we report, you decide.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
Hot News Talk 1240.
In case you didn't know, I'm a bit of a fan of firearms. I like them a lot. Now, I'm by no means an expert, so pardon me if I make a mistake while discussing this, but I certainly am a fan. I really, really like them. Not because I want to kill people. Now, that's something that needs to be tackled, right? That's always a topic that needs to be tackled, and it's something, if you're going to be talking about guns anyway, that's something that needs to be addressed. Is I have no interest in shooting somebody, right? Like I don't want to kill anybody, but if I have to, I have the capability of doing so. Say somebody breaks into my house and they want to steal my stuff. Well, even then, I probably wouldn't shoot them immediately, depending on the level of threat and depending on the amount of adrenaline pumping through my body and all that sort of thing. But again, if they've broken into my house, especially in Georgia, it's it's kind of legal for me to blow their head off if I have to. Now, that's an extremely violent way of putting it, and I know, and that's an extremely crude way of putting it. But that is what happens. If you shoot somebody in the head with 7.62 by 39, you can bet their head and their brain is no longer going to be there. And that's just a cold fact of life. This is something that's been happening for hundreds of years now. The 1500s, the 1400s, there are recordings of there being firearms all the way back to the 1000s sometimes with or the thousands, I suppose, with the Chinese having black powder fired weaponry all the way back into the BC days. Firearms are nothing new, and they're here to stay most likely. Trying to get rid of them is really kind of an impossible thing. And this is something that's being further exemplified by the U.S. State Department. Now, I'm not a fan of the U.S. State Department by any means. I see them as kind of a poor entity, actually, because it really doesn't do much of any good. And that's something that also needs to be addressed. Is the State Department tends to actually not do any good. I mean, we had the Secretary of State for a while. Of course, Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, and then it shifted over to John Kerry, and I believe Leon Panetta. No, he was head of CIA, pardon me. And there's been several heads of the State Department, secretaries of state, and they've all done kind of a poor job, actually. I can't think of any Secretary of State who I've been really a fan of. Yes, even Condoleezza Rice, not really been a fan of any Secretary of State because they haven't really done much of a good job. And the State Department, I can't really point at any incident in which the State Department was involved and say, look what a great job they did over there at the State Department. Look at what a great job they did, how they handled that bureaucratic nightmare and turned it into such a positive thing where now nobody's shooting at each other. And that really hasn't happened. So I can't say that I really have a whole lot of faith in the State Department. Well, now the U.S. State Department has begun the nearly impossible task of banning 3D printable guns online. I say printable because the guns are not 3D printed when they're online. They're not 3D printed online. That's like saying, I've brought you a building and you hand me a blueprint. Well, this is just a blueprint. This is not a building. You have to build the building. So you've not handed me a building when you say, here's the blueprint. So it's a 3D printable gun that they have online. It's the 3D printed gun itself is not yet there. And actually, very rare is the occasion when a 3D printed gun has actually been manufactured. That's kind of the funny thing. 3D printed guns are not really quite there when it comes down to it. Now, I believe in the right to bear arms, and I believe that to the very core of my being, my very fiber, believes in your right to bear arms. Be you from the States, be you from Mexico, be you from Canada, be you from Guatemala, I don't really care. You have a right to bear arms. That's a universal right. Now, this right may be denied, perhaps. This right may not be recognized by your particular jurisdiction, especially if you live in California, but still, I do believe you have a right to bear arms, and I know this to be true because I've done it, and also there are biblical examples of people bearing arms without any sort of repercussion from God striking them down with lightning for owning a sword. No, everyone owned a sword, actually, and it was seen as a good thing because you have a right to self-defense. That's a fundamental right, is your right to self-defense. So we've gotten the whole philosophical argument about guns out of the way, and I know probably you believe that anyway. I'm sure you probably have a bolt-action rifle somewhere in your house shooting 30-06 that you've used for deer hunting with your cousins at some point, right? I mean, who doesn't? So it's a pointless argument to make with you because you probably already know this stuff. Well, in the last decade, 3D printers have gone from a monstrously expensive and marginally useful extravagance to something that a hobbyist can afford to play around with on the weekends. Consumer-grade 3D printers are actually getting good enough to create useful objects like phone docks, toys, and tools. You can even create guns from plans that are downloaded online, and that has the government worried. Now, it's funny the difference between myself and the government, which there are many, but one of them is when they say consumer-grade, you can print out a gun with a 3D printer, and I think, oh, that's great. And folks in the government go, that's terrible. How dare they? And I just think, man, you can print guns if you want to. Let me put it this way. Again, 3D printed guns right now are not very stable, to say the least. I wouldn't fire one personally. I mean, I really wouldn't fire one personally because I don't believe that they're very safe. I would not feel comfortable holding one in my hand and getting it to fire, even if it's a lower powered round like a 380. I wouldn't trust it, honestly. Even 22, I wouldn't trust that. No thanks, man. So you can keep that. I'll take my own SKS that I have, or my dad's shotgun, or what have you. You know, we all have guns in our houses, most likely, and they're probably much more effective than the Liberator, the 3D printed handgun that Cody Wilson helped to design and put out on his website, Defense Distributed. So really, a 3D printed gun is not very effective, and it's actually very inconvenient to use because it's a very large, blocky thing, and it uses a plastic barrel, which is again another thing that makes it very inconvenient. I see it as more of a novelty and an example than anything else. It's not very practical. I wouldn't use one because I have better options, and it's really just no thanks, man. I'll take my own gun. I don't need a Liberator. Now, of course, there is a question of 3D printed AR-15 lowers. But again, think about it this way. I can online, and maybe I shouldn't say this because it's sort of one of those best kept secrets type things, but you can buy an AR-15 80% lower online. No background check, nothing. I mean, it's not a gun in the eyes of the ATF, or BATFE, pardon me, which is all my favorite things, which is the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, BATFE. And I like all of those things, so it's my favorite bureau in sort of an ironic way. So in the eyes of the BATFE, this is not a gun which you've just had delivered to your house, okay? This AR-15 lower is just a hunk of aluminum that you've received at your house, or steel, or whatever you choose to buy it. And you buy a jig, and you use your dad's drill press, and now you can build yourself a weapon. Now, legally, you cannot sell this to another person unless you're licensed to distribute firearms that you yourself have manufactured. You have to get a special license from the ATF. It's really annoying. But for your own personal use, you can use that AR-15 just like you would use an AR-15 that you purchased from a gun store. And this is, of course, especially made easy in states like ours, like Tennessee and Georgia. I personally live in Georgia, where gun laws are very, very lenient. In fact, there may as well not be any in a lot of cases, and it's great. It's very lenient. So 3D printing a gun really doesn't seem like a very big deal to me. But for some reason, this has gotten people all riled up. Now, it begs the question, are people really all riled up because it's a 3D printed gun, or are people all riled up because they're all riled up anyway about guns, right? I mean, what difference does it make, to pull a Hillary Clinton on you, what difference does it make if I 3D print a gun, or if I order one from online and make it? Or even there are plans to buy or build Sten guns, the gun that was designed in Britain as sort of a very inexpensive, I don't want to say cheap because it's actually kind of a robust design, but a very inexpensive weapon that was easy to make and could be distributed to resistance fighters and regular foot soldiers as a SMG. And now you can get plans for a semi-automatic version, which you can manufacture yourself. And again, it's a rifle. That's all it is. It's just a carbine. You can have that gun in your closet along with all your other guns that you bought at the gun store, and that's totally okay. That's totally legal. You can do that. No problem there. Of course, I'm not the one to ask for legal advice. You should check online and check with a lawyer and all that sort of thing before taking advice from me. But still, from my perspective, as far as I know, this is completely legal, and I may or may not have done it at some point. So it's really it's a moot point, really. But it's, again, to create debate about the whole gun thing, which seems like such a moot point to me. People are always going to say, but guns, man, if people have access to weapons, then people will kill other people. Well, that's a valid argument, sure, but people can kill other people in lots of different ways. My favorite analogy is I can use a screwdriver to stab you in the eye and kill you, or I can help to build a church with it, right? I mean, it's just a tool. That's all it is. Sure, it's a tool that was designed to kill, but it's just a tool. It's how you use that tool that defines it. It's not like it's a nuclear weapon that can only kill civilians on a mass scale, right? Like, it's not like it's like that. It's a weapon. It's just a gun. It's a tool, just like a rake is a tool, a shovel is a tool, a hammer is a tool, anything else is a tool. I'm a tool. You're a tool. We're all tools. Hey, so it's just a tool. That's all it is. Well, in the last decade, 3D printed guns have gone from a monstrously expensive and marginally useful extravagance to now something which you could have in your house, conceivably. This conundrum was kicked off a few years ago when rudimentary gun parts started popping up online as 3D printable files. Now, again, that's not a big deal to me. At the time, you'd need to invest at least a few $1,000s in the printer, and the weapon you got was just as likely to explode as it was to fire a bullet. I don't know if explode is the right word. Fall apart is probably the better way to put it, especially if it's an AR-15 lower. There's not really any explosive gases going through the AR-15 lower. So if the lower fails, you're going to be fine. All the gases are going through the upper, and the upper is probably aluminum and steel, and of course polymer, so you're probably okay. If the lower fails, the upper is still okay, and you'll be fine. Worst case scenario, it falls out of your hands, and that's after a round has already exited the gun. So you're probably going to be okay. Again, it's not like 100% safe. I believe only an experienced shooter should do that. But again, you can if you want to. So they say it's likely to explode. I contend with that. The Liberator, however, I don't know. It's a firearm designed by Cody Wilson and his company Defense Distributed. There are videos of Wilson and others successfully firing off multiple 380 rounds from the plastic Liberator. The Liberator is, of course, just the start, and there are already designs for other guns and gun-related objects that would be illegal to buy and sell anonymously if they were produced in a traditional way. Again, that's not really true. If they were produced in a traditional way and they had metal parts in them, just like the Liberator does, if it was a private sale, I don't think that would be illegal. So I'm not sure where they're getting this information over at Extreme Tech. But again, maybe they know something that I don't. Right now, you can probably find the plans for an extended 30-round magazine or a lower receiver for an AR-15. They say assault rifle. It's not. An AR-15 rifle in just a few minutes. Okay, let's clear this one up too, because this bothers me. An assault rifle, at least in the United States, to be defined as an assault rifle, I believe cartridge comes into play. I think it has to fire an intermediate cartridge. I'm not sure about that. But nevertheless, it has to fire a rifle round. We'll just say it's 223 in this example, although it can be 7.62 by 39, whatever. It's just how it is. So you fire this round, right? And it has to be a select fire gun, or else it's not an assault rifle. It must fire at least full auto or burst fire, to be an assault rifle. Otherwise, it's not. If it's a semi-automatic rifle, it's classified exactly the same as any other semi-automatic rifle. It may have what some deem to be a high-capacity magazine, but this does not make it any different from any other semi-automatic gun. It's not. It can be a magazine with an integral magazine like the M1 Garand, the weapon that's famous for being used in World War II, not World War I, World War II, or it can be a magazine with a detachable box magazine such as the AK-47, the AK-74, the AR-15, the FAMAS, the FAL, the Steyr AUG, any other weapon that has a detachable box magazine, so long as it's semi-automatic, they're all the same. It doesn't matter. They're all the same. As of course, there's a barrel length restriction here in the States as well, SBR, all that sort of thing. But again, basically, they're all classified the same. It's not an assault rifle. Well, anyway, this is suddenly getting very real, they say, but we knew the government was planning to do something, right? The State Department already ordered Defense Distributed to remove the 3D printing files from its website in 2013, but that doesn't stuff the genie back in the bottle because, guess what? I have those files. Oh, wait a minute. I have those files? Yeah, I do actually. I have those files on my computer. So I don't have a 3D printer, and even if I did, I can legally own guns. I'm not a felon. I'm over the age of 18. I can own a handgun or a rifle. So there's no problem there, right? Like I can purchase these guns if they were manufactured in a traditional way. I could legally buy them. Well, these new restrictions are part of the proposed change to the International Traffic in Arms Treaty, or regulations, I should say. The ITAR is mainly concerned with controlling the import and export of weapons and related items in the United States, and schematics can be considered under the purview of the law. Thus, posting a 3D printer file or CAD file on the internet that tells a machine how to build a Liberator or another gun would be considered exporting it, as anyone in the world could download it. This, of course, is a very loose definition of the term export. The revised ITAR would define export as remove activities associated with a defense article's further movement or release outside the United States. So, technically speaking, even if it's downloaded domestically, they're going to count that as export. That sounds a little bit out there, but okay, we'll deal with that. So then, if it's not exported in that method, right? Like, could I then put it on a USB flash drive to your house and give it to you? assuming we're all in the United States. Well, according to the law, yeah, actually. So right now, a gun such as the Liberator is not a particularly threatening weapon. It fires bullets, yeah, but it does so poorly because it's smoothbore, it's not rifled, compared to virtually any real firearm. The danger, they say, comes from what it represents. Ooh, a future 3D printer could become more powerful, so the weapons do as a result. This should, with printing metal, ever become affordable for consumers, things could get pretty scary pretty quickly. But again, 3D printers are quite expensive right now. Maybe they won't be in the future, but even if they're not expensive, you can do that anyway. You can manufacture your own firearm. It doesn't really matter what method you use to manufacture that firearm, so long as it's a legal firearm. You can manufacture a firearm in your house. Maybe these people don't realize that, but you can do that. So there's no problem with, again, building an AR-15 lower in your garage, or building a Sten gun in your garage, or welding together an AK-47 receiver in your garage. You can do all that with no problem whatsoever. So it seems like a bit of a leap forward to say that it's suddenly illegal for you to do all this sort of thing. It's really not. And I have the file for the Liberator on my computer. I know people who do. Actually, I know at least 2 or 3 people who do. So there's no stopping it. Once something is on the internet, the cat's out of the bag, right? There's no getting it back in there. And no matter how many times they may try, fortunately, we're not going to be seeing the Liberator going away anytime soon. I can guarantee you it's going to be both on Deep Web, it's going to be on the Pirate Bay, it's going to be on all the different tracking sites, or torrent sites, I should say. It's going to be on Mega Upload. It's going to be, or mega.co.nz, pardon me. It's going to be everywhere. So trying to get rid of guns is a worthless task, because it can't happen, especially here where everyone has one, it seems like. I don't know much of anyone who doesn't own a firearm. And that's okay. They're not violent people. I'm not a violent person. Let's say, as an example, now again, I'm probably preaching to the choir, but let's just raise an example that perhaps you can use on one of your anti-gun friends. If I hand you, let's say you're anti-gun, okay, that's fine. You can have that opinion. That's cool. And I support your right to have that opinion. But let's say you're anti-gun, and I hand you let's say it's a Glock 18, right? 9mm handgun. And I set it on the table in front of you, and you take it, and you're holding it now in your hand, hopefully with your finger outside the trigger guard, and you're holding that in your hand. Are you going to shoot me? Well, probably not. You're not a violent person. You have no interest in hurting anybody. So you're not going to shoot me with that gun. Then why shouldn't you have it, right? I mean, why can't you have that gun? You should be able to own that gun. So why do you have a problem, really? I mean, yeah, you might make a philosophical argument. You can do that too, and it's your right to do that. But it's kind of silly to say that nobody should be able to own guns because they cause so much violence. Violent people cause violence. That's just how it is. And again, people can get even fully automatic firearms on the black market if they so choose. I mean, look at the drug cartels using full auto AK-47s. We're wondering where they got them and all that sort of thing. You can get guns illegally just as you can get guns legally. And it's really a testament to how peaceful a lot of people are, that they're going the legal route and using their guns in a very responsible manner and just having fun and shooting some targets. And there's nothing wrong with that. So it's sort of a worthless argument to say, oh, guns should all be banned and nobody needs a high capacity magazine and all that sort of thing. It's just ridiculous. But again, preaching to the choir, you probably already know that. A teen who has been fingered as somebody who has been involved with Lizard Squad has gotten no jail time, or no jail sentence, for $50,700 fraud and harassment charges. A 17-year-old Lizard Squad member received a 2-year suspended sentence from a Finland court on Tuesday, despite having been convicted of a whopping $50,700 charges. The charges, according to Finnish news outlet Kaleva, correspond with a lot of known Lizard Squad hacking activity, including online harassment, financial fraud, money laundering, and exposing company secrets. That report didn't identify the hacker by name, but another report on the same trial included the pseudonym Ryan and mentioned ties to Lizard Squad. That information lines up with reports from cybersecurity analyst Brian Krebs, who claims that the person in question is Julius Zekil Kivimaki. According to that prior trial report, prosecutors sought up to 3 years of jail time and a fine of 6,600 euros for the teen defendant, and they noted that his attacks included charges or targets such as Harvard University. Instead, the teen received a sentence comparable to American probation, and there's no law time or restrictions Rather, no jail time or restrictions on where he might go, and the defendant will be required to have his online activity monitored as opposed to receiving an outright ban on online services. Again, being banned from the internet is a sentence almost as bad as death. So it's a good thing that they didn't charge him with that one, because it's a good thing they didn't sentence him to no online activity. You know, Kevin Mitnick, back in the day, Kevin Mitnick is one of my favorite hackers. He was arrested, I believe, in 1999, and he was not allowed to use the internet up until, I'm wanting to say, like 2005. It wasn't that long ago. That is a sentence worse than death, really. Not being able to use the internet from 1999 to 2005, assuming that's the correct date. Can you imagine what a nightmare that might be, not being able to use the internet for such a long time? That's truly a fate worse than death, is not being able to use the internet for close to 6 years. No thanks, man. So according to Ars Technica, you can toss your manual overboard. Augmented reality is now aiming at big industry. So for better or for worse, augmented reality, or AR, is charging forward in the consumer space, but there's a place for AR in the industrial world as well. We're not quite at the point of putting Microsoft HoloLens kits on the heads of roughnecks working on oil rigs, but when it comes to complex machinery out in remote locations, augmenting what field engineers can see and do can have a tremendous impact on a company's bottom line. By way of example, GE is focusing efforts on constructing an extensible field maintenance manual intended to be used for industrial equipment. The use case being tested in labs is with oil and gas. Researchers in GE's research center in Brazil are building software that they hope will replace the need to deal with bulky printed maintenance manuals which have to be kept up to date and which lack any kind of interactivity. Interactivity is a huge part of learning. In case you didn't know, interactivity is a very big part of learning. So sometimes there are examples where you can't actually have interactivity because maybe you live in the inner city, there's not really a forest nearby. Virtual reality is an option that could replace that whole experience with experience. It's replacing a true experience with a simulated experience, which, if you perceive it as a real experience, may as well be a real experience. So it's an interesting phenomenon. If it's indistinguishable from the real thing, does it then become the real thing? Ooh, that's a big philosophical topic that we unfortunately don't have time for here on Digital Drive. But replacing, say, the learning experience with learning from a manual by learning from virtual reality, or augmented reality in this case, really opens the doors for much faster learning, perhaps even the destruction of the college system, which I'm surprised hasn't happened already, actually, since we all have mass communications and can communicate with anyone anywhere in the world. Why hasn't local economy destroyed the college system? Why are universities still around? Why hasn't the internet destroyed universities? Probably because people are stuck in a rut. It's the old ways are better. You know, there's no school like the old school is usually the way of saying it. Well, as somebody who's interested in tech, I can tell you the new school actually tends to be better. This is Digital Drive. I'm your host, Russell. We're talking about technology and quite a bit more. Nuganomics.com and David Toulis is coming up in just a few seconds right here on Hot News Talk Radio. He's going to talk a lot more about local economy and free markets right here on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240, and hotnewstalkradio.com. So be sure to tune in for that and get the TuneIn app for your smartphone to listen there.
This is the mob mode. This is the mob mode. What kind of fool do you think I am? Just think I know nothing of
Arnie Guest Goldsmith, Chattanooga's gold standard in quality, selection, and beautifully handcrafted jewelry. Arnie Guest Goldsmith has 7 jewelers on site and ready to assist you in the design of your one-of-a-kind diamond piece. Arnie Guest Goldsmith.